So we are starting. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. We are December the 9th, and we will get started on today's Money Matters with your host, Hung Lu. Okay, so we are going to get into an analysis about should we buy a car versus investing in real estate? Okay, this is not a typical topic that I would even think about presenting. But because in the last month, I've had a couple of coaching clients and a couple of real estate friends who've said, hey, Hung, you know what? I've actually bought a car instead of investing in real estate. And I'm like, what? Why would you ever do that? So before I can say what anymore, I actually need to put down some numbers and actually figure it out. So I'm going to do that with you today and walk you through. Okay, should you be taking your, whatever amount of money you have saved up to buy a car or put it into real estate in some way? Okay, so we'll go into that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So before you take any of the advice I share with you, just keep in mind this stuff is for it's for education purposes. It's to get the conversation going. So please, before you go and implement any of the stuff that I talk about today, please go and check with another investor, talk to your financial advisor, make sure it's right for you. Okay, so before I forget, we are still doing the monthly mastermind, which is not this Friday, but the following Friday. And we also have our breakthrough analysis group coaching session. So if you are interested in doing any of those two items, reach out to me using the QR code, okay? And we will get you into those sessions. All right, so we got that. So the outcome of these sessions, and I'm hoping that you are watching me now because I've been doing this for over a year now, watching this and learning some stuff and able to implement them in your decision making around money. I am really hoping that the information that I share will allow people to be smarter with their decisions with money. Okay, so let's go into it. Let me share my screen and then we will go right into the analysis on, if you've got a chunk of money, should you go and buy a car versus doing something in real estate? So let me make this screen bigger. Okay. And for those of you who know me, like you guys know, like I don't, you know, spend a ton of money on buying fancy cars or fancy things like that. So that's just part of my money story. But this is a situation where I'm going to be going through looking at potentially buying a new vehicle in the next year or two, and potentially looking at buying an e-car versus a regular gas guzzler, okay, which is what I currently have right now. And so there's this, continuous debate about, do I take the cash and buy an e-car now or wait a year or two? Or do I take that money and put it into real estate, which is what I've always done, and just keep buying a cheap car, which is what I have. Okay, so here we go. So let's just run this scenario here because yeah, so some of these numbers are actual numbers that I am aware of. So I'm putting them in here as sort of placeholders. Okay, so let's make this sheet a little bit bigger for those of us who are getting older and need to see numbers a little bit bigger. All right, so let's just say that the car is valued at 60,000, and this is going to be with all the bells and whistles thrown in. Okay, so 60,000. And let's just say that we have cash right now of 30,000. So just to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to put 35. Okay, just so that we could see the numbers here. And this is actually some numbers that I know because in June, I was actually in a car accident. And luckily it wasn't my car, it was somebody else's car. And they actually got a cash payout of 35,000 on the car. And they actually turned around and actually purchased a car for 60,000. Okay. So let's run through this. So the cash payment you have available sitting in your bank account is 35,000. So the question here is, do you buy an e-car? Okay. And it has to be an e-car. So this scenario only works for, like I'm only considering an e-car. So this would be potentially a hybrid or a full E. So let's just say you've got the 35,000 cash and the car value is 60,000 with all the bells and whistles. So your car loan, which is just the difference of your car price minus your cash, is 25,000. Based on a 5-year financing plan from the bank, and let's just say it's 3%, okay? Your monthly payment on this is going to be about $450 a month. So how did I calculate that? So interestingly enough, it's the same formula that's used in Excel that you would use to calculate your mortgage payment on an investment property or your home. It's the exact same formula. So it's the PMT formula. You use your interest rate, your amortization. So in this year, it's a 3% rate with your amortization of 5 years. Okay. And then you put your current price or your current loan amount, which is the 25,000. And we're saying in the future, in that by the end of the 5th year, we're going to pay everything off. Okay. So your monthly payment is $450. Okay. So that means over the course of 5 years, I'm actually just going to be paying about $2,000 in interest. No, that's not right either. Let's calculate that again. So it's, so C8, so that's my monthly payment times my 5 years times my 12 months. Yeah. Okay. And then minus my initial payment of the 25,000. So, so, so I'm going to have principal pay down of the 25,000. Okay. So most of this is going to go towards the principal pay down. And then the interest that I'm paying on this 25,000 is only 2,000 bucks. So this number to me seems really low. Okay. So the interesting thing to realize here is that you're paying 25,000. That 25 is part of the $450. So a small percentage of that is going to go towards interest. Okay. And so the interest amount that's different here is the 2,000. Okay. So that to me was a really interesting number because to me, 2,000 is not a lot of money. And so to pay that much in interest, or it's not that much. Okay. So the interesting thing for me here is that a couple of people I know recently have purchased an e-car over investing in real estate because their argument to me was, Hong, the $550 that I have to pay in monthly fees here, that is equivalent or less than what I would have to pay in gas. And so I'm actually saving money by buying an e-car now because of this, right? And you're going to need a car anyways. So the question here is, do you actually spend more on monthly payments, okay, in gas now? So, like right now, I spend maybe $200 a month in gas, right? Like I don't drive that much, right? So for me, $200 a month is way less, like it's almost half, more than half of this monthly payment of $450. So for me, it wouldn't make sense. That argument wouldn't hold, okay? But if you're spending more than $450 in gas, then this option of buying an e-car might make sense in this particular scenario, okay? So now as a real estate investor, I'm always like, well, why can't I buy the car and buy the investment property too? Like, why is it one or the other? Why can't I do both? Okay. Because the benefit of doing the investment property is that you get to keep the cash in some way, right? And you get to make cash flow, like rental income from that. And so the idea there is to buy the investment property, make the cash flow, and then take that cash flow and pay for the car. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I would usually put forth as the argument here. Okay. So let's see if that's something that we can do. Okay. So the option one is to buy an investment property. So let's just say in this case, we've got the 35,000. That's our down payment money. We're doing a 20% down payment. So I'm not looking at doing a first-time home buyers. This is purely an investment property. And I'm using 20% down. Keep in mind that you may need a higher deposit. Okay, but just for simplicity reasons, we're going to do a 20% down payment. This means, okay, that the total value of the house that I would be able to buy, the investment property I would be able to buy, is $175,000. Okay, so now the way I calculated that was I just took my 35,000 divided by my 20%. That gives me 175,000. That's how you could calculate, saying, okay, how much can I actually go and afford to buy based on my $35,000 deposit? Okay. So then that means that the mortgage that I would get would be 140. And that mortgage amount is just the difference of your 175 minus your $35,000. Okay. So yeah, so to get the value of the property you'd be able to buy is your 35,000 divided by your 20%. Okay. So now usually on a property like this, you might be lucky if you're cash flowing $100 to $200, because after you pay for your expenses from your rental income, you still have to pay for your mortgage payments, your debt servicing, all that. Okay. So let's just say in this case here, we're going to cash flow $200. Okay. So when you look at it like that, you're not making enough cash flow to pay for your car loan here, because now instead of having 35,000 towards your car loan, you actually have to take out a car loan of 60,000 if you're going to buy this e-car. Okay. And based on 5-year amortization at 3%, your monthly car payment is $1,000. Okay. So your $200 from cash flow from your rental property isn't going to cover your monthly payment of your car. You're actually going to be out of pocket by $800. Okay. So not ideal. Now, now, you could say, well, Hung, you know what? I can't even find a place to buy for $175,000 in Canada. Okay. Well, that's not true. There are properties in Canada that you could buy for around $150,000, $175,000, under 200,000. Okay. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the East Coast, like in New Brunswick, there are investment properties that you could buy. You could even buy properties for about 175 to 200,000 in Northern Ontario, like in Timmins, Thunder Bay. There's even places that you could buy this for in like Pembroke. Okay. So, or Aurelia even. Okay. So it's not that far north of the main city. You can even do this in places in BC, like in Vernon or Nelson, even in Mission. Okay, there are still places that you could buy for about $175,000 to $250,000. Okay, so now buying an investment property doesn't make sense here because you're going to be out of pocket about $800,000. $800 a month. Okay, so now here's the second option that I would look at is saying, well, what if I could do private lending with that money, or invest it in a REIT, or put it into stocks, or do something else rather than going and buying an investment property outright, or with that cash all by myself? What if I was just to do an alternative strategy here? Okay, so let's just say that we go and we do private lending with it, or REITs or stocks. Okay, and with this option, we're getting 10% return on our money. So if you know how to navigate the stock market and you can make 10%, that may be an option. Okay. Some of the REITs are doing dividend. There's dividend REITs that you could potentially make 3 or 4% on that, and then have the gain in the stocks itself. So you're potentially at 10%, if not more, every year. Okay. Private lending, easily starting at 10%. Okay. With private lending. So with that, if you put in your full 35,000 into private lending at 10%, you're making 3,500 in interest a year. Okay. And that formula is just your 35,000 times your 10%. Okay. So that is the simple math, and that's per year. So now you have to take that and you divide that by 12, and that will give you your cash flow from this type of alternative investing of about $300. Okay. So now this scenario also doesn't make sense, because you're now then going to have to pay 60,000 for the car or get a loan for it at 3%. So you're actually paying $1,000 still out a month. So you're now out $700 a month in this scenario. Okay, so going with option one or option two just doesn't make sense, especially if you need the car right now. Okay, so now, of course, I'm thinking, okay, well, what if you don't need the car right now? What if I had the foresight to know, okay, I'm going to need a car in a couple of years? Okay, so the one thing here to bring up is the compounding interest. Okay, is that if you can consistently invest your money at 10% and leave the money in, so you're not touching any of the returns year over year. Look at this. If I start at 35,000, I put it in into whatever investment vehicle, I get 10%. Okay. By year 7, I am almost at double the amount. Okay. So this is the rule of 72. Okay. So basically by the seventh year, 2 to 3 months in, I would have doubled my money at 10%. Okay. So if you know that you don't need a car for 7 years and you're able to put 35,000 into some sort of investment vehicle and let that compound, well, by the 7th year, you'd have the cash, okay, to do to put down as a down payment for the car, and at the same time still have your original $35,000. Okay. That to me is what's the most important part, is how do I keep this initial $35,000? Is there a way to structure this so that I can still get the car, still have my $35,000, okay, and still make some other side cash flow from that? Okay. So relating that back to real estate. Okay. I'm also now going to talk about an option 3, which is if you have an existing property. Okay. This is a great position to be in, because if you have an existing property, then one of the things that you could look at is, can I do the Smith's maneuver on it? Okay. Does it make sense to do family banking on it? Okay. So before we get into those two concepts, I do need to bring up the fact that, okay, if you're buying the car for personal reasons, so it's a personal use vehicle, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about isn't going to apply, because you're not going to be able to use them because it's for personal use. But if you're buying the vehicle for business use, okay, then we're talking a different story here, right? Because with business use, a lot of it is a tax deductible expense. Okay, so and if you don't know what I'm talking about here, go and talk to your accountant or reach out to me, and I'll be happy to explain a little bit more of it. Okay, but your accountant will be able to explain the Smith maneuver, the tax deductible expense options with business dealings, and the family banking. If they can't talk to you about the family banking or the Smith maneuver, okay, then that's where you would probably want to reach out to your financial advisor. If you need recommendations to financial advisors, reach out to me. I'm happy to suggest a few that I've worked with in the past. Okay, so this is where you would take your 35,000. Okay, so this is now option 3. And what we're saying is, let's put your 35,000 into your existing mortgage. I'm assuming that you have an existing mortgage here. And if you don't have an existing mortgage, especially if it's an investment property, we definitely need to talk. Okay. So now if this is your primary residence, okay, then it's slightly different. Okay. Because what you want to do is you want to pay down your mortgage as quickly as possible on your primary, so that you could leverage that to do other investments with it, which is the Smith maneuver. Okay. So if you took your 35,000 and paid it against the principal of your property, whether it's an investment property or your primary, okay, if you have a HELOC tied to that, okay, your mortgage will go down by 35,000, and hopefully you have a readvanceable HELOC. That means that your now HELOC will go up by 35,000. It's a dollar for dollar exchange on this, because you're paying dollar right directly to your principal. Okay. This 35,000 isn't going towards any interest. Now, the great thing about putting your 35,000 right against your mortgage, dollar for dollar against the principal, one is that the HELOC goes up by the full 35,000. Okay. The second great thing about this mortgage pay down that you've just done with your 35,000 is that now you've saved about 60 to 80% in interest on your current mortgage. Okay. So if that numbers doesn't make sense to you, go and check out my Glad video on how I talk about where that 60 to 80% of interest savings come from. Okay. At a very high level, what that is because it's hitting your principal. And so now you're not paying interest on this $35,000 anymore. Okay. The bigger the number, it doesn't change actually. So even if it was 5,000 or 10,000, you'll still see 60 to 80% savings on your interest. Okay. So let's just say you put that money into your mortgage and your HELOC increases by 35,000. Okay. So now the idea here is that if it's for a business expense, like you're buying the vehicle for a business expense, you pull out from that HELOC. Now the interest that you're paying on that HELOC is also a tax deductible expense. So this HELOC, let's just say I'm being charged prime plus 1. Okay. And so it's 6-7% right now. So that's $175 that I have to pay in HELOC interest. That $175 is now a tax deductible expense. Okay, I'm gonna let that sink in. Okay, so now you're not paying anything for that. Okay, you still have this 35,000 because you put it against your mortgage, even though you've now took it against your HELOC money here, and you're gonna go and put that to the bank. Sorry, to the car dealer. Okay, and then on top of that, you're going to also take out the loan for the $25,000 difference that is needed to buy your $60,000 car. Okay. So on top of that, you're going to have this $450 monthly payment on your car. And because it's a business expense on that vehicle, you're going to be able to write off this $450 as well, on top of being able to write off this $175. Okay. So now you might be thinking, well, Hong, why would I do that when now I have to pay an extra $175? You're actually increasing your $175. Okay. The benefit of doing this is that now this $175 is also a tax deductible expense. Whereas in this amount here, only the 450 is a tax deductible expense. Now you get to write off the 450 plus the 175. Okay. And the benefit of doing that, okay, is that now you're actually saving this $35,000 in interest that you would have had to pay on your other mortgage. Okay. So you're almost like saving money over here to cover this other expense over here. Okay. And this dollar amount here is actually going to be higher, okay, than this 175. Okay. Because you're actually saving 60 to 80% on that money. Okay. So now the other thing to think about, so that's the Smith's maneuver idea there, if it's for a business use vehicle. Okay. So now in the family banking, this is where you would have a life insurance policy and you would be putting money into this life insurance policy, getting cash value back on that. And then that cash value you can use. Okay. Now that cash value, you have to pay interest on it. It's not free money. Okay. But the benefit of doing this family banking is that now you're paying yourself that interest. Okay. So let's just say that you had the whole 60,000. Okay. If you put 60,000 into your family banking policy, well, in some of those policies, you can get almost 100% of that back, okay, from day one, okay? So then you turn around and you buy the vehicle outright, okay? Now the interest that you're paying on that, even though it's going to be higher, it's not going to be 6% or, 3%, okay? That's like 3% is very, very good. Okay. So with family banking, you're paying prime plus 1, prime plus 2. Okay. So it's going to be higher than the 6%. Okay. But the benefit of paying yourself is that now that interest money comes to you as part of the family banking. Okay. So now this 175 plus, this is going to be double here, this 450. So the $1,000 Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, so let's say this one here, instead of, let's say it's 8%. Okay, so now you're going to be paying yourself $1,200. You're paying yourself that money. Okay, so over the course of 5 years, you're actually going to make 13,000 out of your 60,000 that you just had to go and buy a car with. Like, you're basically being the bank. Okay, so that is the idea around buying a car versus buying an investment property. Okay, if you're just going to do the straight traditional buy, like the analysis to buy a car versus buying a home, it doesn't make sense to buy straight out or to put it into some other investment, creative investment idea, because there's not going to be enough cash flow to cover whatever car loans you have. Okay. But if you can plan it out and take advantage of the compounding interest, if you can utilize either the banking, the family banking, the infinite banking concept, or the Smith's maneuver, it actually might make sense for you to do the investment first, then use the cash flow or the other creative ways to get the vehicle. Okay, so let me just make sure that we covered all of my notes here. Oh, here's an interesting thing. So one of the things that I am aware of is that you are able to rent out your car, your e-car, to somebody else and let them physically drive it for Uber or Lyft. Okay. So I'm not suggesting that you do this yourself, because now you're trading your time for whatever profits you can make from Uber or Lyft. This is where you rent out your car to somebody and you let them make that cash, trade their time for money, and you just sort of make that passive income from buying a new vehicle. Okay. There's some merit to that, because unless you're driving a lot for work, okay, like in my case, I might drive twice a week. Okay. So for me, renting out my e-car to somebody to let them have that benefit of it potentially might make sense, because now I'm getting rental income, okay, or lease income from my e-car. Okay. Yeah, and then we did talk about this, about the car payments being higher than normal because of that amortization period being shorter. Okay. If this 5 years had been like an investment property for 20 or 25 years, look at that. Like, the interest payment here is like literally 140,000. Like, it just wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so let's go back to 5 years there. Okay, so then let's see here. Okay, so the other thing to think about is that when you're buying an e-vehicle, and we like in my family household, we actually have we have e-cars. And the thing that I realized with having an e-car is that you really need to plan your charging times. It's not where you could just like unless you have the charger at home, then that's way more convenient. But if you actually have to charge out somewhere, if you're out somewhere and you've run down pretty low, you have to allot time for that charging. You have to plan it out. So one time we took the e-car, and I wasn't really thinking this through. We took it up a mountain to Cyprus to go mountain biking. Okay. And by the time we got to the top, we were really, really low on our charge. Okay. And luckily, we had to come down the mountain. So as we were coming down the mountain, I picked up the charge again. Okay. But that was a little bit scary, to be stuck up in the top of the mountain with barely enough charge. Okay. So that's something that you want to consider. For me, that was not a pleasant experience. And so that is one of the things that I don't like about these e-cars, is that you really have to plan your charge to make sure that you have enough juice in your car. Okay, so that is all I've got for today in terms of, okay, do you buy an e-car or do you invest in real estate? Okay, like, my wealth has come from real estate. I am a big supporter of putting whatever money you have into real estate. Okay. However, today we've actually shown that sometimes it doesn't make sense to do the real estate path, because it might actually cost you a little bit more. Okay. But the mindset around this, sorry, I've got an eyelash in my eye here, I think, because it's irritating me. Okay, so the thing to keep in mind is that if you are able to be creative and think of an alternative strategy to get some cash flow to cover for your car, then it might make sense. Okay, so that is all I have today. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see everybody next Monday. Bye.